Daniel believed there would always be another Sunday, another chance to drive home, another chance to sit across from his mother, another chance to hear her ask whether he had eaten enough. He believed time would wait for him, but time has never waited for anyone. Every Sunday afternoon, Margaret prepared dinner for two. She was 68 years old and lived alone in a small house at the end of a quiet suburban street. The house was old, but it was always clean. The wooden floors creaked beneath her feet. The curtains had faded from years of sunlight. A small clock hung above the kitchen doorway, ticking steadily through the silence. On the dining table, Margaret always placed two plates, one for herself and one for her only son, Daniel. Daniel lived in the city, less than 2 hours away. When he was young, he came home almost every weekend. He would enter the house without knocking, open the refrigerator and ask what she had cooked. Margaret would pretend to be annoyed, but secretly those were the happiest moments of her week. As the years passed, Daniel became busier. He found a good job at a successful company. He worked hard, stayed late, and answered emails, even after returning home. His managers trusted him. His colleagues respected him. Before long, he was promoted. He moved into a modern apartment overlooking the city and bought the kind of car he had dreamed about when he was younger. Everyone told him that he was doing well, and Daniel believed them. He often told himself that all his hard work had a purpose. One day, he would have enough money to take care of his mother. One day, he would repair her old house. One day, he would take her on a long vacation. One day, when work became less demanding, he would spend more time with her. But that day never seemed to arrive. Every Saturday evening, Margaret called him. "Are you coming home for dinner tomorrow?" Daniel was often looking at his computer when he answered. "Not this week, Mom. I have too much work." There would be a short silence. Then Margaret would speak gently. "That is all right. Come when you can." Daniel always promised the same thing. "Next Sunday, I promise." Margaret never complained. She never reminded him of the previous promises. She simply said, "Take care of yourself, and do not forget to eat." The next morning, despite knowing Daniel would not come, Margaret still went to the market. She bought fresh vegetables, potatoes, and a piece of fish. It was the meal Daniel loved when he was a child. She returned home, tied on her old apron, and began cooking. She peeled the vegetables slowly. She seasoned the fish exactly the way he liked it, and when the food was ready, she placed 2 plates on the table. At 5 o'clock, she sat down. She listened whenever a car passed outside. Sometimes, she stood and looked through the curtains. But no car stopped in front of her house. No key turned in the door. No familiar voice called out from the hallway. As the sunlight disappeared, the food slowly became cold. Margaret finally removed Daniel's plate from the table and covered it carefully. The next day, she ate the leftovers alone. The following Saturday, she called again. "Will you come tomorrow?" Daniel looked at his calendar. A client had arrived unexpectedly, and his manager wanted him at the office. "I cannot, Mom. We have an important meeting," Margaret answered in the same quiet voice. "Then, perhaps, next Sunday." "Yes," Daniel said, "next Sunday." Another week passed. That Sunday, Daniel did not have to work. Some friends invited him to spend the weekend at a resort outside the city. For a moment, he thought about visiting his mother instead. Then he remembered how tired he was. He told himself that he needed a break. When Margaret called, he did not tell her the truth. "I have an emergency at work," he said. Margaret paused. "All right, do not work too hard." Daniel felt guilty for a moment, but the feeling quickly passed. After all, he would visit her soon. There would always be another Sunday. At the resort, Daniel laughed with his friends. They ate expensive food and took photographs beside a beautiful lake. Meanwhile, Margaret sat at her dining table. 2 plates were waiting beneath the warm kitchen light. Outside, rain tapped gently against the window. She watched the empty chair across from her. Then she reached over and moved Daniel's plate slightly closer to where he would have sat. Months passed this way. Every Sunday began with hope, and every Sunday ended in silence. Margaret continued preparing 2 portions. She continued listening for the sound of Daniel's car. She continued believing that this might finally be the Sunday he returned. But her body was beginning to weaken. Some mornings, she woke with a heavy feeling in her chest. At first, she ignored it. She told herself that it was only age. Then the pain began to come more often. One afternoon, while carrying a bag of groceries, Margaret suddenly became short of breath. She stopped beside the road and held her hand against her chest. A neighbor saw her and helped her home. "You should see a doctor," the neighbor said. Margaret smiled. "It is nothing serious." But the next week, she went to the hospital alone. After examining her, the doctor's expression became concerned. He told her that her heart was weak. She needed more tests and should remain in the hospital for observation. Margaret looked down at her hands. "Can I return on Monday?" she asked. The doctor did not understand. "Why Monday?" "My son may come home on Sunday," she said. "I want to cook dinner for him." The doctor tried to persuade her to stay, but Margaret insisted. She returned home with medicine and instructions to rest. That Saturday evening, she called Daniel again. He was standing in his new apartment, adjusting his tie before leaving for a celebration. His company had completed a major deal. His colleagues had organized a dinner in his honor. When his phone rang, the screen displayed one word: "Mom." Daniel looked at the time. He was already late. He considered answering, but he knew what she would ask. He could already hear her voice. "Are you coming tomorrow?" He pressed the button to silence the call. "I will call her later," he thought. At the restaurant, the tables were covered with white cloth. Glasses shone beneath golden lights. Daniel's manager raised a glass and praised his hard work. Everyone applauded. Daniel smiled. For a few hours, he felt proud of everything he had achieved. Then his phone vibrated again. "Mom." He stared at the screen. His colleagues were calling his name. Someone placed a glass in his hand. Daniel turned the phone face down. Later, he told himself. At home, Margaret slowly lowered the phone. The pain in her chest had returned. Still, she went into the kitchen. She washed the vegetables. She placed the fish in the oven. She prepared the table as she had done so many times before. 2 plates. 2 glasses. 2 sets of silverware. She folded a napkin beside Daniel's place. Then, she sat down to rest. The house was very quiet. Only the clock could be heard. Tick, tick, tick. Margaret looked at the empty chair. For a moment, she imagined Daniel sitting there as a child. She remembered him swinging his feet beneath the table. She remembered how he used to complain about vegetables. She remembered the way he would hug her from behind while she cooked. The memories brought a tired smile to her face. Then a sudden pain struck her chest. Margaret tried to stand. Her hand reached for the table, but her strength disappeared. The phone fell from her fingers and struck the floor. Her chair tipped backward. The food remained on the table, still warm, still waiting. A neighbor noticed that Margaret's kitchen lights were on late into the night. When no one answered the door, the neighbor entered and found her on the floor. An ambulance arrived soon afterward. Near 2 o'clock in the morning, Daniel's phone rang again. This time, the caller was not his mother. It was the neighbor. "Daniel," the voice said, "you need to come home. Your mother has been taken to the hospital." Daniel sat up immediately. His heart began pounding. He dressed without turning on the lights and ran to his car. The streets were empty. Rain covered the windshield. Daniel drove faster than he ever had before. As the city lights disappeared behind him, he began making plans. He would take time away from work. He would find the best doctor. He would move his mother into his apartment, or perhaps buy her a new house closer to him. He would finally take her on the vacation he had promised. He would visit every Sunday. He would never ignore her call again. He had so many things he wanted to tell her. All he needed was one more chance. At the hospital, the hallways were bright and cold. Daniel saw the neighbor sitting outside a room. The older man slowly stood, but he did not speak. Daniel looked at his face and immediately understood. "No," Daniel whispered. The doctor explained that Margaret had suffered a severe heart attack. They had tried to save her, but her heart was too weak. Before she lost consciousness, she kept asking the same question. "Has my son arrived?" Daniel stood motionless. The doctor placed a hand on his shoulder. She also said something about a plate of food waiting on the table. Daniel lowered his head. For years he had believed that he was working to build a better life. Yet in that moment, everything he had achieved felt empty. His position could not bring his mother back. His apartment could not speak her name. His new car could not take him back to the previous Sunday. And all the money he had earned could not buy him one more hour at her dining table. After the funeral, Daniel returned to Margaret's house alone. He opened the front door. The familiar smell of the house met him. Her coat was still hanging beside the entrance. Her shoes were still arranged neatly against the wall. A book lay open beside her chair. The clock continued ticking as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. Daniel walked into the kitchen. The dining table was exactly as Margaret had left it. 2 plates, 2 glasses, 2 chairs. One chair was empty because he had never arrived. The other was empty because she would never return. Daniel saw that his plate had been covered. He slowly lifted the cover. Beneath it was the meal his mother had prepared. The vegetables had dried. The fish had become cold. Beside the plate was a small piece of paper. The handwriting was weak and unsteady. It read, "Heat the food before you eat, and please take care of yourself." Daniel sat in the chair that had waited for him through so many Sundays. He looked across the table at the place where his mother should have been. For a long time he said nothing. Then he picked up the fork. He took one bite of the cold food. It was the same recipe he had eaten throughout his childhood. But now, it tasted different. It tasted like every call he had ignored, every promise he had broken, every Sunday he believed would come again. Daniel tried to swallow, but tears filled his eyes. He covered his face with both hands and cried like a child. He had spent years preparing for a future with his mother, but he had failed to be present while she was still alive. Many of us are living like Daniel. We tell ourselves that we are busy because we care. We work longer hours so our families can have more. We chase success so that one day, everyone we love will be safe and comfortable. But while we prepare for that imagined future, the people we love are growing older. Their voices are changing. Their hands are becoming weaker. Their time beside us is quietly becoming shorter. We believe love can wait. We believe apologies can wait. We believe visits can wait. We believe there will always be another Sunday. But life has never made us that promise. In Buddhist teaching, all things are impermanent. Everything that is born will change. Everything that comes together will one day separate. Every beautiful moment will eventually pass. Impermanence is not meant to frighten us. It is meant to wake us up. A flower is precious because it will not bloom forever. A sunset is beautiful because it lasts only a few moments. And the people sitting beside us today are precious because they will not always be there. Understanding impermanence does not mean living in sadness. It means paying attention. It means listening when someone speaks, instead of staring at a screen. It means returning a phone call while there is still someone waiting to hear our voice. It means saying, "I love you," before those words become something we whisper beside a grave. Perhaps there is someone in your life who has been waiting for you. A mother who hopes you will call. A father who does not know how to say that he misses you. A friend you intended to visit. A person you love but have taken for granted. Perhaps there is an apology you keep postponing. Perhaps there is a meal you have promised to share. Perhaps there is a door you should walk through before it is too late. Do not wait for the perfect moment. The perfect moment may never come. Call them today. Visit them while they can still open the door. Sit beside them while their chair is still occupied. Listen to the stories you have already heard many times. One day you may wish with all your heart to hear those same stories again, but only silence will answer. After his mother's death, Daniel returned to the old house every Sunday. He repaired the roof. He painted the walls. He cleaned the kitchen exactly as Margaret had done. Then, each Sunday evening, he prepared dinner. He placed 2 plates on the table, one for himself, and one in front of his mother's empty chair. A neighbor once asked him why he continued setting a place for someone who was gone. Daniel looked at the empty chair and said, "For years, my mother believed there would be a Sunday when I returned." He paused. "And I believed there would always be another Sunday to return." Outside the window, the evening lights slowly faded. Daniel imagined his mother sitting across from him. He could almost hear her gentle voice. "Eat slowly. And take care of yourself." Daniel smiled through his tears. Then he lowered his head and continued eating. Some meals can be reheated. Some houses can be repaired. Some money can be earned again. But some moments, once lost, can never be recovered. Do not wait until a chair is empty to understand the value of the person who once sat there. Love them while they are here. Listen while their voice can still reach you. Hold their hand while it is still warm. Because one day, you may be ready to give them all the time in the world. But time may have already taken them away.